So it's not what you say that your children hear. It's not what you say that your parents hear. It's not what you say that your wife or husband or partner hears. It's what you say plus what they think. And if you want to change thinking, you have to cross into a place where they can hear you.
Okay, hello. Welcome to the Wiser Tomorrow podcast, and I'm delighted to be joined with the wonderful filmmaker, David Hoffman. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, and it's truly a pleasure. I think it might be best, I'm sure many people watching, especially because I'm set up here on YouTube, will be familiar with your work. But just for those who haven't, if we could begin by just answering the question that is the namesake of your website, who is David Hoffman?
You know, you ask that question of everyone. I guess it's good for your program, but who is David Hoffman today? You mean right now? David
Today,
Hoffman
before, forever.
forever. David Hoffman does YouTube videos. He's almost 82 years old, and he started his career in 1963. Picked up a 16 millimeter wind-up Bolex camera and went out to some migrant workers who lived near my house on Long Island. Some other guy had told me they were living in duck houses. So I carried my Bolex camera, and another friend of mine carried a Nagra, which was a 26-pound tape recorder. And we spent 2 days there. And we finished the film with a local civil rights organization, and we sent it to President Johnson. It was called Got to Move. Send it to President Johnson. That's crazy. Early 1964. And somebody sees it, and they show it to Congress. It's 13 minutes. And this is wonderful. I'm outside. I'm my own independent filmmaker. I'm shooting documentaries, and I'm asking questions. And I guess my core competency, if it's anything, is to hear answers from other people that's more than what they said. So my next question, we'll see how good you are at this, Tyler, is asking a question that here's the guy, but he didn't really say that, so ask another question, and I'm genuinely curious. That's the start of my career. That's the current my career. I'm still curious, very curious what the other guy's thinking, guy, girl, thinking inside. So I became a documentary filmmaker. I did 100, almost 200 PBS shows and Discovery Channel and Learning Channel, and became famous in my own right. And then Silicon Valley hit, and I was being sponsored by different corporations, and one of them was AT&T, and they sent me to Silicon Valley to help them to launch startups. So here I had done all these documentaries you can see clips from on my YouTube channel, and I got into the Silicon Valley world. Young guys, very smart, fast. Stuff is going on. People are saying yes when you have an idea, or no, I can't stand you, right to your face. It was wonderful. Absolutely loved it. Worked with a startup called General Magic, and there's now a feature documentary called General Magic the Movie, which a lot of people are watching. It's really fun. Made of my old footage mixed with new footage. It's a great story. And that went on for me. I did all kinds of stuff, traveling the world and doing other things. Kind of was out of the documentary television business. And I'd also made some feature documentaries, but I was out of that for a while until the bubble. And the bubble killed me because I was all into startups and I didn't get paid. I just got stock. And that stock crashed to nothing. Couldn't afford my mortgage. Didn't have my film equipment anymore. Things were video. Everything was video. So I started again. And this time there was eBay. And I had things on my wall. And my wife and I took the things off the wall and sold them. So we began selling on eBay. And we became kind of eBay really good at it. I really began to ask people like, why are you selling your stuff? I would write other people. Same thing as I always did, only now it was eBay. And they would tell me stories. And I began to record those stories using cheap equipment. And then YouTube comes up, right? YouTube, 2006, 2007, 2008, and 2009. And I'm on YouTube. This is wonderful. I don't make any money from it, but I'm talking to people and I'm recording people. It's wonderful. And the comments are spectacular. So today I make my living mostly as a YouTube filmmaker. I have 925,000 subscribers who are pretty active, writing me all the time. I spent my day at it. And then in my evening, I work for startups still who want to use YouTube. That's a that's not a lot about me, Tyler, but it's quick history.
No, that's perfect. And that gets to the first kind of point I want to get to, because anyone who watches your videos, I think, is immediately struck by the breadth of what you have to share. I mean, it's from, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the beginning of the 1960s into more or less present day, and on everything under the sun. So it's just, what is the full size of your archive, and do you have a particular workflow in terms of how do you choose? Because you post every day. So with such a big archive, how do you go about saying today is the day that I post this video?
Well, it's me and every other creator who's watching you, who's a creator, a YouTube creator, will know it's me against the algorithm. The algorithm, it gets you. It's changing all the time. It basically screws independent filmmakers and goes for the who's the money, where's the money, where's the money, where's the money. And now it's into shorts. And I don't like shorts. I don't like the whole style, the fast edit, click a short, click a short, click a short, click a short. If you're going to watch me, at least 4 minutes, sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes an hour, a few times 90 minutes. And about 20% of the people on that 90-minute film watch the whole film. So they're sitting down. That's my audience. And I fight the algorithm daily, and I try to figure out how can I beat it to get to my audience. And I'm not doing very well right now. Sure, I have a lot of views and a lot of subscribers, but 9/10 of my videos get 10,000 views, 20,000 views in a month. They used to get more. So the algorithm's not paying attention to David Hoffman right now. And that's what I do. Every single day I get up, my process is I spend an hour and a half on comments. I read hundreds of comments a day, maybe 1,000, and I answer 100 if I can, because my audience is very involved with expressing. If you look at the comments on David Hoffman videos, they're 4, 5, 6 paragraphs. People are taking time to want to communicate in an environment that's got no real nastiness. I use moderators who read, and if they find racist, attack people who just want to criticize others, they take them out. So my people who are left, are trying to talk to each other. They have strong opinions, left and right and sideways, but they're talking. And that's the community. And then I go and I pick my film for the day. My archive I've done about 15% of the archive. That's kind of disappointing. If I had a few editors, if I had a grant or something, I could do something where I could get 3 or 4 people working, I could get this archive out there. But right now, I don't know that I'll make it to complete the archive. So the archive are things I shot, things I made, things that other people gave me, collections early on that I developed where filmmakers would share things. So I have a lot of that also. And stock footage that I assembled a long time ago working with the National Archives, where they would give you stuff if you copied it. And I have wonderful things there. And I go to my archive and I just decide, well, what's my audience want to see today? Some of them are bluegrass, some of them are military, some of them are political, some of them are teenagers or people who want to see their own youth, really, from 3 generations. My primary audience is, this is interesting, Tyler, maybe 29 to 45, not people my age, people wanting to know their parents and their grandparents. So my process is I try and post every day. I answer comments every day. It's a long, to maybe 10-hour day.
I'm not surprised to hear about your audience demographics like that. I mean, that's nearly me. I'm 27, but I think it's at about that point in your life where you start to develop an appreciation for the type of footage that you're posting. Before then, there's the lucky few who have their head in the right place and can appreciate that. But I think for a lot of others, it takes time. And the thing that makes it further incredible about the size of your archive is, as far as I understand, again, I think 12, 13 years ago now, there was a fire there. A large portion of it was lost. So I can only imagine the scale prior to that fire. And you gave a fantastic TED Talk, which I would recommend everyone listen to, about how you sort of made something great from that experience.
That was a good film. I like that film. Thank you for commenting on that. I mean, here I am. One morning I get up to go over to Google. I'm consulting to Google on YouTube. So I'm YouTube consultant at that time. It's a good job. And I get to the top of the mountain over 17 near Santa Cruz, and my wife calls screaming, there's a fire. And I look to the left at the next mountain and I see smoke. Can you imagine that? So I turn around at 100 miles an hour, not caring about the police, and I fly home. And as I get there, within 5 minutes, I hear a big crash, and my archive is falling between the second floor and the first floor. And boy, the film burns. So I lost a lot, but a lot other people had, and some I had stored. So I got done, and I said, I got to make something good out of something bad. It was what I was taught as a kid. And I'm going to tell you that story because we have an hour. It's a quick story. So it's the blackout in New York. I think it's 1976, but I'm not sure. And I was working as a young filmmaker in a editorial shop. And all of a sudden, the whole city's black. And I go outside, and there are thousands of people walking up 7th Avenue, going home, and the bars have candles. And there's these Hasidic Jews on the corner with an umbrella selling flashlights for $1. And everybody's buying them. So I buy a flashlight. And I say to the guy, hey, that's pretty smart. And he says to me, don't you know? Make something good out of something bad? You're Jewish, don't you know that philosophy? And I did. That's what my parents had taught me. So I turned around and I made that video for my children. And I'm a TEDster. I'm an old-time TED attendee. So Chris Anderson said, look, could you tell the TED people what happened to you? It was only 9 days after the fire. And I recorded a short TED Talk, which is pretty popular. And I made the movie, which now is being used by people with hurricanes and tornadoes and fires. It's just an attitude. It's an attitude. The house burned. Not all of it, but most of it. I took my wife. Someone else took our 2 kids. We went down to the water, and I sat along the water. Fire was over at 11:30 a.m. It was 2 p.m. I said to my wife, this is good. I know it's good. Something's good. And she believed me. She didn't have to. We turned around and moved. We found a new community. We changed lifestyle. And the insurance company took care of us. So, and I can tell people about that if they ever write me on a comment. I can tell them how to deal with the insurance company. So that movie is called Everything. I think it's called Everything Which Is Yes, which is an old poem that talks about life and that everything is great. Did that answer your question, Tyler?
It certainly did. It certainly did. And it's just sort of hard to I sympathize with it very much as one could, in the sense that I'm also a collector. I love my knickknacks. I love the things that I've aggregated over time.
What do you collect?
Mostly things. If I'm taking a trip abroad, I try to bring at least 1 or 2 objects, and I try to avoid the tourist trap, the ashtray, the shot glass, and so on. I try to find something that's something. Sometimes it's just a rock I find, or
when I was a kid in New England. I'm sorry to interrupt you about that.
No, it's okay.
When I was a kid in New England, and when I was a young man in New England and a big time collector, there were antique shops everywhere in people's homes. And I can remember one, just to give you an example, was down the road from where a relative of mine lived. And you went in there, and these people were alive at the time of the Civil War. They were in their late 80s. They were farmers. And you'd go in the room, and there was all these things that people had bought in the 1800s from their trips. Haunting stuff. And it was a nickel to $1 for the most part. And I became an insane collector of what other people purchased. And I made a documentary. One of my clips is on the Grand Tour. Have you ever heard of the Grand Tour?
I'm familiar, but I don't know if I could give you an accurate description.
The Grand Tour was what wealthy people did from the United States, and it involved going to the great ancient sites, Italy, Greece, not usually France, it's Italy and Greece primarily. And they made these plaster of Paris little teeny beautiful molds, and you collected them from the different museums that you visited. Oh man, I have a whole collection. I went nuts, and I made a video on that. The people are either collectors or they're not. My wife is not a collector. She would like to remove everything that's around there. It's dusty. Get rid of that stuff. Sell it. And me, I can't. And I do sell every once in a while, but I keep getting more. So when in New England, what they did was the man of the family had a barn. The barn was connected to the house. It served many purposes, But one of those purposes was all the junk went there. In the Depression era, you saw newspapers piled up and nails which had been pulled out, old things kept by the collector. Yeah, the house stayed clean. My house is not, because I have collections around it. I don't know if other collectors will relate to that.
I think so. I definitely can. And the dynamic with my girlfriend is very similar. She doesn't stand any of it and says, put it in your office and hoard it around you and get it away from me.
And it keeps moving out, right? You keep going,
yeah.
that shows up one day.
Yeah, sometimes it's nice to, push the boundaries a little bit.
People should see my film on Jay Walker. It's called the Walker Library of Human Imagination. And he is I don't know if he's a billionaire, but he's close. He invented a whole bunch of technologies. And he built a
Priceline founder, right?
Priceline founder, yes, Priceline founder. I have a video on it. It's the Walker Library of Human Imagination. He decided to collect human imagination. And he built a 5-story building next to his house. And he gets these things that are just fantastic. That's his passion, I would say passion, not hobby, passion.
I think it's interesting, as you said, it's either you are or you're not, but I really connect with the object. And it's sad that, as you said, like today, those types of antique stores and finding those sorts of items in people's homes is just it's just not going to happen. I've been even rural parts of Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe and so on, and even there, it's still shot glasses and ashtrays. I mean, all of the findings have just been eviscerated, so it's sad.
I don't want to look at it that way. I do not want to look at it that way. I agree with you that the stuff has changed, and there are very few things that are one of a kind. We used to see all things that were one of a kind, not the shot glass. Today, there are very few. But if you go into the antique shop here, one of them, you see in Mickey Mouse, you see in $6 Million Man, and for the generation older than you, those are memories. Even if 100 million other people also have it, you have it. And you see every once in a while something else that just doesn't make any sense. A piece of a car. And it's artistically magnificent. There's a guy here in town who built his house, the interior, completely based on junk that he had found. There's things coming out of the wall and there's carved wood. It's still there if you're a collector. And you'll find it. It's not just in antique shops. There's still postcards. Postcards never got all that expensive. And the great postcard era of the 1918 war era, tens of millions of cards sent a year in the United States, not just England and France and Germany, but spectacular. So I still collect that. You know what else I collect? Pens. Pens. It's wonderful to write with a fountain pen. And most of the time they're very expensive new, but not so expensive in the antique shop. So you just got to try them out. I collect pens. And there's several junk shops around here. And there's also the YMCA type place. And they got stuff. So if it's in your mind to capture a piece of your history or the history of the people that came just before you, it's doable and it's fun. Although I know what you mean, it's not individually made things anymore.
And again, there's a silver lining that you're sort of touching on, which is part of the fun is finding it. And if it's harder to find, it's a bigger reward when you do find it.
Well, I reacted to you in part because people of your generation on my YouTube channel so often see negative. Now, maybe it was always that way. I don't believe so. It certainly wasn't my generation. We thought everything was going to be great. And we were going to make it great. But so much it's not like it used to be. Now, there are some things. You can't buy a house. That's terrible in the United States. That's just terrible. That was the big promise of the American dream. But there are other things that are still absolutely wonderful about today that 50 years from now, those who are doing what I'm doing now on YouTube, who are recording now, when they're in their 60s, 70s, and 80s and showing it on YouTube or whatever it is, it's going to be great. People are going to say, wow, look at what it was like then. Cars actually drove with people driving them. Isn't that amazing? And you hold this thing in your hand. What's that called? Oh, that's a cell phone. Oh, a cell phone. You hold it in your hand. That's a strange old thing to do. Uh, those kinds of things they're just amazing moments in time. We're at the tail end of the horse age, as they say, regarding cars, that's for sure. Regarding a thing you drive around and crash into somebody else. That doesn't make any sense at all. And you guys don't have things on your body that tell you everything you need to know about your health? Yeah, we had a couple of apps. An app? What's an app? That you could check maybe your heartbeat. That's it? Didn't read 15 different genetic viruses? No, I mean, and most of all, when we get really stupid because of ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is going to make us all stupid, all of us. So what's left for us when it can outthink us? It gives us information. It adds all the things at once in our memory banks and tells it to us better than we can do it. It seems to me what's left are feelings, our feelings. So people who express feelings about things now will historically be very meaningful at a time when people maybe can even express more feelings because the information becomes less important. The nightly news, the information bank is less important, seems to me, and the feeling bank goes up.
The ramifications of everything that's happening now are terrifying, to put it mildly. But I think to push back.
Does it terrify you? Oh, that's interesting.
No, it really does, because I guess I'm feeding into exactly what you were saying, which is that I'm losing faith probably day on day in terms of how responsible that we will be with these technologies. On the whole, I would like to think, at least, I still am more glass half full than half empty. But in that regard, I look at social media and I kind of see artificial intelligence and a lot of these other technologies as sort of phase 2 of that genre of technology.
Tyler, when you say that, what did they say about the book?
Yeah, no, you're right.
Dangerous, horrible. It's going to cause people to think all kinds of thoughts. What did they say about the television, the radio? They said, bad, it's bad. It's going to give people too much information. It's going to cause riots. And worse, I mean, I have a book. Do I have it here? This is called, let's see. There it is. It's called a chapbook. I collect chapbooks. This one's from 1820. And these were what were read in school. And this is what everybody learned. And this boy does not follow all the directions of his mother. This is printed in Boston, given away in the school. I have hundreds of them. He doesn't follow. His mother says, I don't want you to be with those boys. They're bad boys. He goes with the bad boys, and because of it, he falls in the river, and he almost drowns, and a man saves him. And he says, Mother, I will never not listen to you again. What does that say? What was that society? That society was saying, these kids, they're becoming wayward. There was a time when they weren't wayward. They listened to their parents, and they did what the parents said. To me, that's not a very good idea. You got to be an explorer. You got to be your own teenager. You got to break with your parents in a little different way than smoking in the barn. You got to do something else. You got to think differently. You got to grow. And that was this time, and it failed over time. And the same thing is happening now. These new technologies, sure, they have dangerous stuff like the hydrogen bomb did, right? I mean, but yet without nuclear technology, in some regards, we'd be in deep shit with anybody with cancer or something like that, and other radiation issues. So I see it all as good and challenging, and I see the human being as going to places where the challenges require a human being. So I warn you that you become, if you look at your history, our history in America, you become part of the group that always sees the future as potentially negative and dangerous. It's always dangerous. The American Revolution was unbelievably dangerous. That's how it seems to me. And I'm hearing it from your generation and hating my generation. Hating, not mine, but the baby boomers. Hating the baby boomers. Baby boomers caused the destruction of the world. I get on a regular basis. The destruction of the world?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that's ridiculous. And in general, I would agree. The only thing that I would potentially, they have to think about it probably more, but to push back a little bit again, the concern I have is with the radio and the book and the television and so on. The common link is that, you know, there are differences between the mediums and people are always afraid of what's new, but there's still human generated, they're artistic mediums, and they very quickly kind of become appreciated as such. Something like ChatGPT, it's missing the common thread between all of those things. And that's the element that concerns me. But overall, that being said, I have full confidence.
No, let me stick there. Let me stick there with you. Let's you pushing back, and that's great. I love the term pushback. Oh my
Yeah,
God, what a good. That's
bit of a
corporate.
euphemism. Yeah,
It's a corporate term. It came out of "May I push back," and then the person would say it completely wrong, and it would be okay in the meeting. It's really, really good. You know, the best one of all, help me to understand.
yeah,
When I
yeah.
say help me to understand, the person who disagrees completely with what I'm saying will try to help me to understand their point of view. Artistically, certainly long before the internet, there was a PBS series on art in which the 8th episode said art is over because every physical thing had been done, and what they showed when they showed art being over was in Yale University 3 large boulders, and that was a $100,000 piece of art. And this guy said, "I'm not knocking it, but everything now is repeating something else that has already existed. Every form, everything you see has been repeated before." That's right before digital art, which everybody said would wreck art, and photography, which everybody said the cell phone would cause the real great photographer not to exist anymore. To some extent, that's true, because there's tens of millions of photographs being taken every day, and some of them are pretty good. A lot of them are pretty good, and they're getting better all the time. So I want to say to you, ChatGPT fails so greatly in the area of creative art that when I speak with it, I know this is a being that's unbelievably attempting to be factual. And you and I are, at least I, as an artist, as a creator, fact is interesting, and I try. But as a documentary filmmaker, I am not trying to be factual. I'm trying to give you a point of view, mine. Every single person who makes a film that you see on YouTube, makes a video, is giving you their point of view. Some are obvious about it, not many. Usually they're showing it as kind of the news almost. That's baloney. There is no news. There's the news that I presented. The being of chat so far is, oh, don't go too far there. I want to say that that's also possible. It's very machine-like, and it doesn't threaten me. Now, if it ever gets to be more creative than me, I'm still me. It can't beat me in the way that I look at this thing and the things it does to me when I touch it.
I would agree. I think the additional thing I would add to that is that it also will, I anticipate it further placing a value on the type of human error that makes art sort of beautiful. There's certain things that don't get categorized exactly as a flaw or an error, but they're these idiosyncrasies of the person who makes whatever the content is that a computer may never be able to identify as sort of the heart of the work, but rather something that is better off excluded based on some metric.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. And I would ask you this. As this interview goes on, what I'm curious about are who the hell are you and why are you doing this? I mean, you have a science background. Are you having fun? And I have no idea who is Tyler and what's driving him. And ChatGPT could not answer that question for me, even if you had spoken to it. It wouldn't really, you go into your beingness and you, like, why are you interviewing anybody, including me?
I'll give you hopefully a somewhat succinct answer.
Why succinct? No, don't, no, just go wild. Just, I mean, really, seriously, I'm asking a serious question here. I don't get it.
My again, as you said, my background is in chemistry. For a long time, that was the plan. I expected to, from as early as middle school, to keep going as far as I went, go my undergraduate, my master's, hopefully the PhD, and so on. But after finishing my master's, I sort of, I fell out of love with it in a certain respect, and just had a crisis of meaning of sorts. I mean, it wasn't so dramatic, but I really had to sit down and go, what I realized is I love learning. I love science and technology, probably above all else, but I love history, I love philosophy, I love learning about anything. And although, again, chemistry and physics and so on will always be something I care deeply about, it's not something how I wanted to make an income and spend, the vast majority of my time. And I had always, I grew up on YouTube, I grew up on these platforms. It's a near obsession for me. And for so long, I had been considering getting involved directly in some way, shape, or form. And the thing with podcasting that was appealing is, first of all, whenever I watch a podcast or a video essay or so on, I find myself there's questions that are never asked that I would really love to get the chance to ask. So the simplest answer is I want to ask the questions. I want to pursue my own curiosity. And this is the best way to do it. I mean, if I can just directly speak to the people who are experts, who have had the experience and perspective for the topics that I'm interested in, whether nobody watches this or the whole world is watching, I'm very happy. And that allows me to play the YouTube game without getting too fixated on the algorithm. I mean, I will happily admit I am interested in developing it as a business and a project, but at the same time, it's a hobby for me.
Mm-hmm. I understand what you're saying. I would say for me, the curiosity is similar, but I am not interested in famous folks. Now, I filmed a lot of famous folks, but if you look at my channel, it's the ordinary people, just like my hat says. It's the ordinary people. It's ordinary life. It's the person next door that really fascinates me. And that's because I have a basic prejudice. And one of the things that made me real good early on is a part of my process was before I filmed anything, I wrote down my prejudices, all of them. What does David Hoffman think about this, about that, about that? And I put them aside. I now know what they are. I've written them down. And I'm very open with myself. What do I think about what he's doing, about how rich he is, about how old he is, about how good looking she is, about everything I can do? And I put that aside, and then I would talk. So my ears and the mind behind it were completely open. There wasn't a secondary track running. And that led me to, yes, I filmed amazing people who were amazing. Yeah, Philip Johnson, the old architect who designed great buildings all around the world, very wealthy, born wealthy, lived in Richfield, Connecticut. Everything he said to me when I interviewed him, I had never thought of before. That was a thrill. So I agree, there's something in your interviewing people who have lived and thought and done great stuff. But the guy next door can also be good. Now, not all of them are. When we were doing Making Sense of the 60s, my best television series, which are many clips on YouTube, 6 parts, PBS giving you total freedom at that time, 1990, 1989. And I'm talking to people about the 1960s. And we tested 100 for every person we interviewed. How did we do it? We had phone calls with people who were recommended, just people, not famous people. And the first question that we would ask is, you like your work? If somebody said, yeah, they were not chosen. If somebody said, I love it, they might be. If somebody said, I hate it, and I'm going to tell you why, they might be. So I looked for opinionated people and people who had strong opinions about what they were about, how they felt freedom, how they felt about America, how they felt about all the different issues you hear about each day. And it was wonderful. It gave us 180 interviews, and those are posted on YouTube, some of them, with just people always writing me, how did you do that? How did you get that person to talk like he's talking to his friend? That's how. That plus one other technique I'll share with you, you'll find interesting. People very often, when they sat down, we had a camera, lighting, microphone boom right here and right there. They felt nervous. And I would say, are you nervous? Good. Be really nervous. Be terrified. Because this is going to be shown 50 years later to your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. and they're going to see you, and everything you say is going to matter. So make it matter. Then I would ask the first question. And the first question, 20% of the time, people cried. They were so ready to say something rather than nothing. So I would never start with, tell me about your background. Yuck. The first question should be like that. Right at the person. Oh boy, this is going to be different. Tony Schwartz, one of my mentors, he's on my YouTube channel. He created the idea of the 24-second soundbite for television. If you don't do the 24-second soundbite, people don't listen to you, they turn you off. It's his view. And he and I are doing a conference together, and I'm being filmed, and he's being filmed by the press. And it comes to that night on the press, and I'm not there, and he's there. I said, Tony, how did you do that? When he would appear on the talk shows, he would answer the question in such a way that the first sentence was critical to you wanting to hear the rest. And when he asked questions, he was doing the Jimmy Carter political campaign. Jimmy Carter was losing all over the place. Mr. Peanut Farmer, he was getting his ass kicked. And somebody hired Tony Schwartz and goes in there. Tony sits him down in his chair and he says, Jimmy, you like running for president? I mean, why would anybody do that? And the resulting interview was so real that when they ran it on TV, it radically altered the relationship with the public. So the lesson is, for everybody who should be recording legacy, you and I both believe that. Every family, every individual who is old enough should be recording not the ski trip, not the birthday party, they always look the same, but the reality of somebody's real life. And you always say to people, don't just say the good stuff. Don't do that, because what that does is that's like George Washington chopping down the cherry tree. And isn't he a nice man, George Washington? Didn't he do anything negative? Did you ever read anything negative about George Washington when you were growing up in school? No. I had to really research to find out what a three-dimensional character he was. In myself and in my interviews, I try to make people three-dimensional so that the people that come after them don't just think, boy, I can't do what he did. Isn't he great?
No, that's great advice. And it's kind of funny you bring that up, because just to be fully honest and fully transparent, again, one of the other motivations that I've started doing this is I recognized in myself a long time ago that I'm a very anxious and very nervous person. At this stage in our conversation, for example, I'm fine. I feel very comfortable. It's great speaking with you, et cetera, et cetera. But if it wasn't visibly clear, when I first get going on these conversations, again, very candidly, one of the reasons I start so soft, aside from trying to provide context for the audience, is that it takes me a minute to sort of settle in. And I set out to do this also to try to develop the skill set of talking to a camera and explaining my thoughts like coherently and in a long form conversation. So yeah, I've noticed most of my interviews suffer greatly because the intro begins with a very nervous, very apprehensive, tell me about yourself, before I feel that the conversation really ramps up to where I'm happy that it gets.
So here's my suggestion for you. It's a good one. You start the conversation this way. I want the audience, and I want you to know, David, that I'm nervous. I'm not a comfortable person when I look at a camera and see a microphone. I think I'm like a lot of other people that way. So my questions might seem a little stilted at first. Are you nervous? Now that's a start to an interview. You start with you. I try very often to start with me. I don't just ask a question. I say to someone, I am asking you this question, A, because I care, and B, because I think the audience does not understand you, would like to hear from you. I was doing Alfred Eisenstadt, the great Life magazine photographer. It's on my YouTube channel, clips from it. And Izzy is his name. And Izzy was an 82-year-old great photographer who had photographed Marilyn Monroe, Sophia Loren, all kinds of stuff going back through Nazi Germany. Amazing photographer. And I got to know him a little bit. And I'm saying in one interview, hey, Izzy, you're so cheap. You don't spend money. You buy the crappiest stuff. Why are you doing that? And that led to a relationship in which Izzy says things he never said before to anybody. So when the film is running at the Smithsonian, to launch Eisenstadt's photographic presentation to the country. They ran the film. And when it comes to the end, Izzy stands up and Izzy says, I don't know how David Hoffman got me to say these things. I'd never said them before. I know how I got him to say it. I asked the question. Now, am I uncomfortable? No, because the curiosity overwhelms the discomfort. And I always say about me, I make myself as I am, an ordinary person. And now my face feels old to me right now. I cannot fix that. I'd like to fix my face, but I'm not going to do that. When my wife looks at me and she's younger, I see my face in the mirror. I go, yuck, I don't like that. That's one of the things bothering me right now. Another thing is, I can't remember names quite the way I did. I'm pretty good at it, but I can't remember them the way I did. So I got to apologize for that. So I have my discomforts. Now yours is, you're an introvert. Introvert can only be a good interviewer, it seems to me, if you become part of the conversation as a person. You, Tyler, the three-dimensional you. You that either can't do things other people can do or has your own thought about it. I don't mean you give a 5-minute talk. That would be my feeling. Otherwise, you're going to end up with 500 interviews that all are essentially about the other guy and similar. How you evolve the story, because this interview is a story, is it not, to you?
Yeah. And I think that's also the difference there's a distinction between an interview and a conversation. And ideally, the goal is to reach that point where it's clearly a conversation to everyone who watches. But thus far, they've been a little bit more of passive interviews, which is also fine. But I would like to get to the point where there's a bit more of a back and forth.
I agree with your conversation. What are you curious about with me right now in the conversation? Because it's gone some places. And what, if you want, you pushed back. I love pushing back. It's very wonderful. But what is there anything you're curious about with me? Forget about my history or anything you might find that interesting or whatever.
There's a very long list. I'll give you one off the top of my head. One is, I think it's the first sentence or second sentence on your website. You have a quote that I've heard you say in your videos many times, and I have it here. And it's not what you say that your audience hears. Your audience hears a combination of what you say and what they already think and feel. Therefore, to communicate effectively, to reach your target audiences, you must first deeply understand them. And that struck me on two fronts. The first is from anyone looking to make film or content creation in general. But more interestingly, that seems one of the key problems with how discourse in specifically the United States has just dissolved, because whether it's the media or traditional film or so on, now it seems we've reached this point where there's no intent to sympathize and try to adjust language and perspective and approach, knowing there's another side out there who's going to just completely disagree. It's intentionally provocative. There's no attempt to try to garner sympathy and find a middle ground and productively change minds. So I was just, in your opinion, since the 60s, do you feel that idea has been really caustic for modern media?
The interesting thing about your question is, I love that you quoted that, is it's brilliant what I'm saying. It's you either get it or you don't. It's not what you say that people hear, that anyone hears. They do not hear what you say. In order to hear what you say, they'd have to have a mind with nothing in it. They hear what you say, plus what they already think. And what comes out is not what you say. It's a combination of what you say, if they're listening, and what they already think. So it's responding with their own thinking. Therefore, if I'm going to communicate with anybody, including you, I have to know what you think. If I don't know what you think, and I'm trying to sell you McDonald's, and you're a vegetarian, that ain't going to work. I got to know what you think. If I'm speaking my feeling, and I'm speaking it to an audience of 18-year-olds who are from a wealthy community in northern Connecticut, that's very different from when I'm speaking to an inner city Puerto Rican audience in New York City. I have to know what each of those people think and not give the same wonderful speech, or else it won't have the same effect. So everything that I do is based upon my audience, and I'm constantly learning more from the comments of what my audience thinks. And when I say just what I think, I'm going to tell you what I think with no awareness of who I'm speaking to. I tell the audience, right now, please give me the opportunity just to say what I think, because I don't know what you think. Before I have any communication, including the one with you this morning, I have tried to understand some things of what you think. Some of them I knew. I knew you were an introvert. I knew you were a science person who was reaching out. I didn't know you were curious. I didn't know you were a collector, so I have information. So it's not what you say that your children hear. It's not what you say that your parents hear. It's not what you say that your wife or husband or partner hears. It's what you say plus what they think. And if you want to change thinking, you have to cross into a place where they can hear you. Right now, most of the right-wing, political right-wing, and most of the left political right-wing are preaching to the choir. They're speaking to people who agree with them. They are not attempting to even slightly cross what is a worldview divide. I can't even speak to the other side unless I can cross a line which seems impossible to cross. I think you're a terrible person. I think you're a racist. I think you're a liar. I think to cross those lines and get to where I can have a chat with you ain't easy. Was it ever easy? In the generation gap era, yes, there were, particularly among the Vietnam vets and the Second World War warriors, there were places people could cross. So when there were anti-war vets, they were very influential with World War II patriotic warriors because they could cross a line. They had some similarity. I've seen that happen in farmers. I've not seen that happen in the churches. Very sad. The lack of ability to cross to the other sides and hear each other ought to be in the church, I think, but the church preaches doctrine. It doesn't preach cross the line and hear the other guy. Sometimes it's very difficult to hear what you cannot accept. So this issue is a big one, I think. But when I talk to my wife, she's always saying to me, how the fuck can you say something I just said better than I said it? Well, the reason is partially because I heard what she said behind the words, and I try to respond to that, not just to, here's my side, here's your side, here's my side, here's your side, which never gets anywhere. So I really appreciate your looking at it. It is a tenet of my life. Don't speak what you say without being aware of who you're speaking to and what they think. Because it's the combination of what they think and what you say that is communication.
And the question is now, how do we, whether it was there before or not, I guess is an open question, but how do we get that back? How do we teach future generations?
Oh, are you kidding me? Man, you're in some illusion, Tyler. Are you kidding me? It was not there in Emerson. It was not there in Thoreau. It was certainly not there in the Revolutionary War.
But might it have been there more between people, between the average person? Maybe not in the media, maybe not.
No, there were 10,000 things you couldn't say. All kinds of things. In Maine, you could beat your wife and chain her publicly in 1900 out in front of the house, legally. Nobody said anything. Child abuse before my time, nobody said anything. People didn't talk more freely. My God, they talked with a whole 1,000 rules. In order to talk freely, I have to hear you before I can understand you. And that can be really tough. Let's say you're in the South and it's 1955 and you're in Mississippi. I just posted on this, somebody who described it. And they had these poll taxes and other things to avoid allowing Black Americans to vote. And they were tricky. Did they ever talk to even each other about what they were doing? That I don't know, but they certainly didn't talk about it. Didn't talk about how you had these different rules where you could get around the poll tax, where you didn't have to take the test in order to vote. They were just lying. Are they talking to each other and admitting to the lie? I don't know. I'm not sure about that. But certainly this is a time when there's more speech by 1 billion times with social media than ever before. On the other hand, you don't see a lot of people really trying to talk to each other. Crossfire was big trouble when it ran on CNN, and then a Fox-like Crossfire. Yeah, my point of view, your point of view, my point of view, your point of view. If you just said the same thing when I'm done speaking without any change, then you didn't hear me. Because change occurs in communication. If I hear you and it adjusts me, I respond differently. I've heard you.
Yeah, so let me rephrase the question in that case, because yeah, I would have to agree. Moving forward, I suppose, because it's something where, I'm sure you've told countless people this idea, and I'm sure many others have in certain capacities, yet you don't see it being so pervasive throughout society. So how do you educate people to digest? Because it's about not just exposing them to the point, it's getting them to really roll the idea around in their head and have it as a conscious intent whenever they're having any conversation.
I think it's a superb question, and I will give you my opinion and a technique. More importantly, the technique than the opinion, which is, in order for me to do this, I have to know what I think. First, I have to know what I think in order to even hear what you think or try to cross any divide. So I use a pen, and I use an ink pen and a pad, and I go into a seat that's very comfortable, and I go beyond the outside world, and I go inside, and I just write what I think about anything. And what I write doesn't come through my brain. It's like my gut and my heart writing on the page. I don't know what's going to come out next. I see it coming out, and I say, yeah, that's what I think. And I have a whole thousands of them, of my own thoughts. Some of them are completely nuts, about health issues, for example, about sexuality and my sexuality and my confidence in myself as a man. And when I look at them 30 years later, they seem sad and largely wrong, my self-criticisms. Some people would call it a diary. For me, I'm more curious. What am I going to talk about with Tyler today, I said to myself, that would have meaning for his audience, which he's trying to grow? That was what I went into it with, but you've taken me places that I would not have expected I would have talked about. So there I'm just talking my talk. But I use a pen and a paper, and I learn what I think. And then, this is really good, I think it's not Thoreau or Emerson, but one of these guys who said, I believe intelligence is when you can express the other guy's point of view better than he can. That's interesting. I do that all the time. You could ask me about many different people that I don't agree with. I, David Hoffman, does not agree with, and I can express how they feel, like I've crossed into their worldview. And that, I think, makes me very good as an interviewer and more able to communicate. That's how.
And one thing I would argue, mate, you left out, but is something that you talk about quite regularly, is authenticity. Because it's all linked. Audience capture and just how much of an impact your words are going to have comes down to a function of authenticity. And it's also interesting the point you made about the direction the conversation is going, because I've had another problem with the whole production that has sort of shown itself to be potentially a great advantage, which is, the number one thing I do in preparation for the talks is just learn as much about the person as I can, dig as deeply as possible, especially stuff that is as old as possible. I don't just want what they posted yesterday or a talk they gave a year ago or so on. But I have my list of questions in front of me, and they sort of serve as a rough guide, but all of the conversations typically go totally a different way. And it may not always be the most interesting thing to the audience, but it's certainly the most interesting thing to me. And what I've realized is only then can I be authentic. If I stick to the script and I try to sort of calculate more analytically, what does the audience want to hear, and how does that balance with what the guest wants to talk about and what knows about? The second that starts happening, my robot voice comes on. I can't just indulge in the conversation and really listen to what you're saying, because I'm in my head and I'm thinking about what to ask next, and from the perspective of the guest and the audience and so on. So I guess it's a double-edged sword, because like the collecting is one good example that didn't strike me. That wasn't my intention, but that is certainly an interest of mine and something I could talk about for much longer than we did.
Well, you're talking about something I completely agree with, and I want to add an area of awareness to you because it'll help you. And that is this. If you look at these talks, and the reason I said yes to you is because I thought you were pretty good the way you handled people. I liked it. But if you see the talk as an adventure and you don't know what this adventure will lead to, you don't know how it'll affect you, the recording, the audience that's listening, but you next day or something. I see them all, including you, as an adventure. I don't know where it's going. What is this guy going to draw out of me? What am I going to say to his audience, and how am I going to say it? And will it matter? So I see that adventure takes courage and freedom because you don't really know. And then you only found out later, wow, that was really good. I don't know how good this interview is. I have no idea if any of your people will say, shut that guy off. And usually people shut me off in the first 2 minutes. So I'm I can find out on YouTube whether people ever watch the thing.
That's a. Do you find yourself really checking the analytics and really keeping an eye on those things? But is that from more of a practical standpoint or from
Oh,
kind of the sentiment you just expressed?
yeah, every day. From a money perspective, totally. And from am I doing the job? Am I reaching people? If I have a 12-minute video and the average length is 2 minutes that people have watched, what percent I want to see have watched the whole thing? And 50% turned it off in less than a minute. And 15% watched the whole thing. If my goal is to have those 50% watch, I'm in trouble. I don't even know why they turned it off, but they didn't like it. They're fishing. They're just looking around on YouTube. But the 15% I care about. If I start off saying, I'm only going to reach 15%, but that 15% stayed with me, and those are my audience, then I want to find out who are they, as much as I can. Age, gender, place in the world. It's not easy, and you don't get a ton of information. I wish I got more, but I try to figure out what 15%, and can I reach them again? Can I get them again a second time on another video? So I do use the analytics.
I've noticed one of the best metrics I've realized in terms of how committed an audience is, at least on YouTube, is that community tab, because it's a massively underused part of the platform by most people. And I think your community tab and your audience has more engagement than I've seen on channels with many, many millions of subscribers. So it's certainly interesting. But
That's very insightful. Thank you. Thank you for that.
have of course some of the videos you've posted. I think that the most viewed is 20 million, 10 million, like many, many millions on many of your videos. Did you anticipate that those would be the ones to reach that level? Or has it been a bit of a surprise where you say, this is the one that's going to make it all around the internet, and then it stays a bit flat, and then something that might strike you as a bit more mundane?
I'm wrong all the time. The ones I thought would be nothing. I got a guy who's called an ordinary person, talking from the 1950s, ordinary 50s man or something. It's got, 7 or 8 million views. I thought nobody's going to watch this guy. Not that I didn't like him. He was an ordinary guy. Went out and hung out on the corner, had ice cream sodas. I can never tell. And I would feel pretty stupid about that, except look at Hollywood. I mean, they spend $100 million with guys who have 25, 30 years experience at audiences and fail dismally. How could they do that with their expertise? So no, I don't know. I don't know. I have a woman. She's an ordinary woman. She talks about her early life in Spain and how she liked Spain and stuff like that. Nobody was going to watch it. And it has maybe 25% watched the entire hour unedited. Because some of my stuff is completely unedited. You hear screw ups and everything. No, I have no idea. And I keep trying. I posted a wonderful 1993 computer store, and people loved it. And it became semi-viral quickly. So I posted another one. I had 3, and it didn't go anywhere. I think it's the algorithm more than the people, but
Yeah, no, I'm sure it's a combination of things. So we're coming up on time, and there is one question in particular that I really wanted to make sure we got to, and that's, when you turn on the camera and you're not uploading from your archive, speaking from the heart, offering some words of encouragement and some words for some helpful perspective, one thing you've touched on many times is uncertainty, and how uncertainty for you has been the thing that has been one of the most challenging things in your life to sort of grapple with. And you've made videos, which I certainly recommend people watch, about how you've overcome it and how you handle it even to this day. But I think for me, I found hearing your advice very helpful, and I don't think it could be said enough. So how has uncertainty affected your life, and what do you do even today to sort of mitigate it?
That's one hell of a question. That's very good, Tyler. Um, I hate uncertainty like we all do. I can't stand it, particularly medical. For shit's sake, my daughter is a nurse practitioner at Stanford, at the San Francisco General. They call it the General. It's what she sees come in there of every age from 2 years old to 90 is horrific. Horrible things happening all the time, emergencies all the time. I hate it. So do you. So does everybody. Only thing I can do to keep the anxiety at a moderate level is go to the present. Like right now, an interview is ending. Something has come to an end. If Tyler does his job, it'll be there forever. I've just recorded an hour with a man who's kind enough to give me this opportunity, and that's where I'm going to sit. Uncertainty would be, oh boy, I wonder if I shouldn't have said that. What's going to happen there? Maybe it's not going to work. Or whatever. It's all gone. And right now, I just finished it. That's how I deal with it. And I do talk about it a lot because it plagues me a lot.
Oh, we can end on a final pushback, which is the thing that I find funny about that is that you, going back to the part of our conversation talking about ChatGPT and the fear of these future chat, I mean, that is uncertainty. Yet you effortlessly went, don't worry about it. That's not how it works. They say the same thing about everything that comes. So it seems like there's more to the story for you. It's not just uncertainty.
It's uncertainty when it comes to health particularly. Health is take away health from the issue of uncertainty. I don't have any uncertainty, really, truthfully. So that I was not clear about that. You are right. I was not clear. I'm not uncertain about being me. I'm me. I'm not uncertain about trying new things. Try them. I'm very uncertain about health, disease. The body being weak makes me crazy. I'm frightened. And yet I go on.
That's all you can do, I guess, right?
It is all you can do. The alternative things too. Well, listen, Tyler, I don't know what's going to happen out of this, but you'll share it with me, I hope.
Oh, of course. So again, David, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And in my research, I saw there were very few interviews with you. So to be one of the few now online, it's a pleasure, truly. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you too, Tyler. Very good job. Take care.